And we're back with part two, everybody. And this is more ragtime music. This is actually my favorite piece. It's a waltz. It is called the Bethina, a concert waltz. So Scott Joplin, as you read about in the book, is the originator of ragtime music. No one's done it as good since. All right, so we left off with rich people, two rich guys fighting over a woman. And we'll shift our gears a little bit to child labor, another hallmark of the era before protections were put in place and child labor laws. Now all that stuff has to happen overseas, so we can spend $6 on a T-shirt at H&M. We don't want to see it, but this is probably the classic picture of child labor. So machines play a very important part in this book. We'll talk more about machines in a minute. There's another sad picture from the period. This is a nice one. This is down on the Lower East Side where Tata, who is a fictional character, by the way, and his daughter live in the mother until he sort of throws her out. And this is what life is like. You know, dead horse in the street, cobblestone street, kids playing around dead horses. It was not pretty. Most densely populated place on Earth at the time. Probably the modern day Lower East Side is Mumbai in India. It was a thriving, busy, bustling place. I love this picture. Look at all the street life, horses and vendors and people buying things, and just a throbbing mass of humanity. So that is Lower East Side. And you can go there today. It's much quieter, but they have a terrific museum there called the Lower East Side Tenement Museum. And it is my favorite house museum. It's a rare house museum dedicated to poor people and not rich people. And there's a classic photograph of people living in a tenement, a Jacob Riis photograph. And this brought a lot of attention to the horrible living conditions there and led to changes in laws to make them a little bit safer, at least get some fresh air in there. Another one of those pictures. And this is a very famous labor picture. Those of you in my history class saw this one. This is the strike up in Lawrence, Massachusetts, where Tata goes to work in a mill and where his life turns around, and the workers went on strike for better wages and better working conditions. And as often happened, the state militia, the state army, which you see over here, they showed up to make sure the unions didn't create too much trouble and maybe shoot them up a little bit to get them to go back to work for minimum wages and make money. Here's how Tata travels to get up there. This is a great thing called the Interurban Railway, electric trains. One went right by where I'm sitting right now, long ago, 100 years ago, and you could get almost anywhere on one of these. These things went every place, but they're long gone. But this is what Tata would have ridden on to get up to Lowell. Okay, so one of the main historical figures, who we'll show a picture of in a minute, is Henry Ford, and the concept of this assembly line, right? So this worker here, this guy's got one job. He puts on that, maybe I'll change colors and get fancy. He puts on that nut. This guy, he's doing his job, and they do the same job all day. They stand in this spot, and they wait for the car frame to come along, and that is what they do. This makes for much more efficient work. Before this, you'd have four guys, and they would have a room full of parts, and they would build the car. And of course, if you do that, you have to know how to do a lot of stuff. But with the assembly line, with the car chassis, that's what this is called, the chassis, just rolling along, each person does his job with almost all hymns, does his job doing their part. Now, this is very symbolic in the story. How do you get these people to work faster? Well, in the old days, you'd have to go yell at your workers to go faster. Here, you just speed up the assembly line. The car comes by The chassis moves a little faster. You've got to turn the bolt a little faster. You have to move a little faster. And the human is responding to the machine. Very important concept in this book. The machine, the age of the machine is coming. And of course, now more than ever, we respond to the machine. They're called phones. They gesture, they hum, they flash, and we do whatever they tell us to do. GPS bosses us around. So this was the beginning of that era. So here's the very, very important assembly line at the Ford plant, Model T Fords, which are a big part of the book. And people become a part of the machine. History is a great machine that we're all a part of. This is all how this book operates. And there's Henry Ford with his famous Model T, which was the first mass-produced affordable car. He did not invent the car. First mass-produced affordable car. And it was available in any color you wanted as long as that color was black. And why did he choose black? Anyone? Anyone? It was the fastest drying paint. So speeding up the assembly line. Black, for many years, black was the only color choice because it dried faster than any other color. So there is Henry Ford there. He hated unions, really hated Jewish people, wrote a lot of anti-Semitic books, but he did pay the workers decently so they could afford to buy his cars. Very interesting character in American history, worth learning more about at some point for you. There's a fancier one, similar to maybe what Coalhouse has in the book. They did get a little more elaborate as time went on. There's a cruiser built more for the family. And then the fire company, that's an important scene. You see this is the type of engine that was horse-drawn. That's a big conflict in the book. The firefighters resent the fact that a black man, Coalhouse, has a car while they're still using steam power. And you see there was a very hot fire going all the time. So all they had to do was fire it up to get the pump going. The steam engine would fire the pump and they could shoot water. This, of course, is modern people using an old thing here. And this is why it blows up and kills people and creates such mayhem, the first explosion in the book. And there's Scott Joplin, who invented ragtime music, and Coalhouse Walker is sort of based on Scott Joplin. Coalhouse didn't, he didn't invent anything in the book. He's a performer. He didn't create ragtime, but they have similar mysterious origins. And there's kind of presented as a boob in the book, J.P. Morgan, one of the wealthiest people in the history of human beings. And as Emily put it in history class, he did banky things. He was the person who arranged the financing of mega major corporations, the first mega major corporations, steel trains from that era. And he was extremely, extremely wealthy, to say the least. And there he is with his trademark gigantic nose, which only got bigger over time. And he would often use that in a very intimidating way. You see his close set eyes, and he was a pretty monumental figure in the time period. Here are the robber barons of the time: John D. Rockefeller, oil; Vanderbilt, transportation, shipping, and then trains; Carnegie, U.S. Steel; and then Morgan, that we just talked about. And they all get mentioned in the book. And they're referred to negatively here as the robber barons. You can make up your own mind whether you think they were great Americans or not. But they were filthy, stinking rich. We can say that for sure. Here's a newer slide. These are the sort of the modern day robber barons, the equivalent of the people we just looked at. Bill Gates here, who does Microsoft stuff. Jeff Bezos is the Amazon guy. So two tech guys: Zuckerberg, Facebook, Instagram. Who is that guy? Larry Page, maybe? He's a software guy. Mike Bloomberg over here, Bloomberg Media, former mayor of New York. Warren Buffett does banky things. And these two characters, I think they're like telecom people. I forget who they are. So there is a modern day version of the old robber barons. So here's another building in New York City. We looked at the tenement photos. This one is very, very different. This is the Morgan Library. So J.P. Morgan, with all his massive amounts of money, loved to collect two-dimensional things. Paper, mostly, drawings, journals, books. He collected 3 Gutenberg Bibles, the only place on earth that has 3 Gutenberg Bibles. Gutenberg invented movable type, and the Gutenberg Bible is sort of the greatest book of all time to have for collectors. This is a great place to visit. Again, I highly recommend visiting the Morgan Library, the collection of one of the richest people in the history of Earth. And then the same day, take a walk down to the Tenement Museum and see the poorest people on Earth from the same time period. Here's the interior. That is not my office at Columbia Green, close to it though. That is the interior of the Morgan Library and his vast collection of rare books. Now, the scene where he meets with Henry Ford, where they really look like a couple of idiots, happens in this room, and you can visit these rooms when you go there. The Red Velvet Room, as I call it. So this is where he would have meetings and intimidate other rich people. So J.P. Morgan, super rich guy. There's one more shot of the library, and it really is worth visiting. They have sheet music that Mozart wrote, not that you bought in the store, but the actual pieces of paper that Mozart made the little notes on. And it's neat because there are no eraser marks because he just wrote it right out of his head. And other great first edition books, and so it's sort of a rare book lover's paradise. This is the middle room. This is where we're sort of getting ahead of ourselves. You probably haven't read this far into the book yet, but this is where the gang ends up. I don't want to be a spoiler. This is where the gang ends up. This is an interesting lady. Her name's Green, an African-American woman, and she was the head librarian at Morgan's Library. Now, this is his personal library. You couldn't go in there and sign out books. You still can't. You can go there and do research, but you can't sign out books. Miss Green here was his librarian, which is a very interesting thing for a woman to do at the time, and a black woman at the time as well. So a lot of little curious things in the Morgan story. We're going to cut that there because we're getting close to the 15-minute mark, and we'll pick this up in a minute.